All right, so let's take a step back and let's try and think more broadly than just the oil market. And let's try and think about the broader global climate change problem, because we're not just talking about private goods, those oil drums anymore. We're needing to fill out the rest of this typology. Up here, just to sort of help us think about, what is the context in which we're thinking? Let's imagine we've got our big planet and we've got some continents, and this is going to be embarrassing. I can't really draw that well, but this is going to be just, suggestive, right? So we've got the planet, and then we've got, let's just color it in. This is obviously not to scale. Let's have this be the global atmosphere. And really, the thing that we all benefit from is a stable climate, um, not one that's warming too much, which is not the current state of affairs, right? And so obviously that stable climate is something that, that we all benefit from. It's this sort of stock of gases that have been built up over time. The fact that I enjoy the stable climate doesn't detract from the fact that you might enjoy the stable climate. And we both can do things to impact the stability of the climate, chiefly emitting greenhouse gases, right? Through the various ways that we do that. But it's not just an outflow here. We also need to remember that the Earth itself uh, takes in greenhouse gases and functions as a carbon sink, right? Like um, if you have a big forest, that forest is inhaling carbon dioxide to build trees, right? Crops are using carbon dioxide to build calories, and grains and corn and all that kind of stuff, right? Soil captures carbon. There's a lot of uses of of the earth as a carbon sink, which we all benefit from, but which has to do so much with land use, that our decisions impact each other in a really concrete way, right? So let's sort of using that as the mental model now try and sort of fill out these other components. Well, here we were just talking about the Earth as a carbon sink, and really you can think about that as being, it's hard to exclude people from it, but because different uses of the land cover are sort of mutually exclusive, there is some subtractability to it. So what it's a good example of is um, an open access resource. So I'm going to put um, the carbon sink of Earth. Um, Let me also just add some more examples because I think they might help to ground things a little bit more. Another great example of an open access resource is groundwater, um, right? Here, groundwater aquifers, they span miles. It's hard to exclude folks from groundwater. If you've ever seen the movie There Will Be Blood, there's this famous line where he goes, "I drink your milkshake." It's like basically you could pop a well down into an aquifer, and it's hard to know who's drawing from that, and that water actually does go away, right? It's subtractable, um, especially because a lot of these aquifers have recharge rates that are like geological in their time scale. So that's one. The other example would be a fishery. Um, uh, Fisheries, you know, definitely subtractable. If you eat a fish, nobody else can eat that fish. But it's hard to exclude because the fish stock themselves, they move around, they move borders. Notice though that that's sort of an institutional question in part too, right? Like you can exclude people from the fishery, by various policy mechanisms, in which case you're trying to tackle the excludability question by changing who actually has access, right? So let's consider what's kitty corner here. Kitty corner are, and I'm looking here at this quadrant, are goods that are easy to exclude folks from, but that aren't very rival or subtractable. And these are sometimes called club or toll goods. Um, and I think that really we're so familiar with heat waves these days that the example that I could think of was a cooling center. Um, in big heat waves, a lot of metropolitan areas will, they'll identify places like malls or libraries or other large indoor areas where folks who don't have AC in their homes can go to cool down. And, typically these places don't actually deny entry, but the fact is that they could. And that makes it fundamentally different. But that cooling effect, right, is not really subtractable. We all get to enjoy pretty much the same sort of benefit from AC. That's not rival. Maybe a local pool would be another good example because those typically do charge admission in a sort of because they're not a crisis kind of setting. But so then that leaves finally this pure public good part. And here, I think, the stable climate is the biggie. It's not rival because my benefiting from the stable climate doesn't detract from your benefiting from the stable climate. And it's hard to exclude people from it because we're all on this same planet, right? For the most part, the atmosphere is pretty well mixed. So emissions one place or another are going to affect, the whole population pretty much equally over time, or in the same way. Obviously, the impacts are really different depending on where you are, but it doesn't. It's not a sort of local thing like noise pollution, for example. And so one